we will not project the words on the screen that we do not have. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, and I thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance, now and always. Thou and thou only, first in my heart. High King of heaven, my treasure thou art. High King of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, O bright heaven's sun. Part of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all. Be seated.
Good evening. Good to see you all out tonight. You know, it was 70 degrees today. And you know you can't put Roundup down until it's at least 60. So today was my day to round up all the weeds in my yard. I'm going to start this evening. We're streaming tonight. And welcome all those that are out there in the streaming world. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Joe Skinner. And I'm a member of this church. Sometimes I teach Sunday school. But what I think we'll start with tonight is I'm going to ask Brother Larry if he would open us in prayer, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Larry. Just to start tonight about announcements, we have this Thursday, no, let's see, the 20th, right? So it'll be Friday, is the men's prayer breakfast, no, excuse me, is the 24-hour prayer. Starts on Wednesday, or Friday evening, and goes 24 hours at that point. So if you haven't signed up, there's a sign-up sheet out there that you can sign up for your hour of prayer. Also, men's prayer breakfast is scheduled for 7:30 this Saturday at IHOP in Cary. And also on Sunday, we're going to have a guest pastor or guest speaker, and that's going to be Andy Murr. Okay, Andy Murr is going to be here to present the message. We also are going to have man-to-man lunch at noon after the service. On February 28th, we have the Women's Monthly Bible Study and Card Ministry at 10 a.m. in the Fellowship Hall. And then on March 1st, we're going to have a Gideon Sunday, so we need to come prepared for our love offering. And any birthdays, there's none that have, the last one's the 16th, so the James and Jen Heisler birthday, their birthdays are on the same day. Wow. That's good. Well, tonight's Bible study is titled Leave a Legacy, and it's in 2 Chronicles chapter 17. And I guess the question I have for us is, what will you leave behind? When your name is mentioned 30 years from now, what will people remember about you? Or will they remember you? Will they remember you left them a house, your family? Will you have left them investments? Will you have left stories to tell? Or will they have left a spiritual foundation? We often think of a legacy in financial terms, but that's not necessarily always so. Inheritance is what you leave to someone. A legacy is what you leave in someone. Inheritance is money, property, and assets. But a legacy is character, faith, wisdom, and examples that you leave someone. Money can be spent, yes. Character multiplies. If children inherit wealth without inheriting values, they may feel entitled, they may lack resilience, they may repeat financial mistakes. But when they inherit wisdom first, wealth becomes a tool and not a trap. So leaving people, you've heard many, many stories about people leaving somebody a lot of money, and the next thing you know, it's all gone. But when you leave somebody a lesson about life or lead them about a spiritual foundation, that's forever. But Scripture shows us that the greatest legacy is a spiritual influence that we leave others in our life. In 2 Chronicles, which we'll read here shortly, we meet King Jehoshaphat, a man who inherited a divided kingdom and left behind something far more valuable than wealth. He left spiritual stability and the reverence for the Lord. He loved the Lord. Jehoshaphat was the son of King Asa. The king was divided, Israel at the north at that point in time, where Israel was divided. Judah was in the south. Spiritually unstable times and adultery was common. Yet Jehoshaphat chose a different path. Godly living impacts future generations, and that's what we're going to learn a little bit tonight. God reveals this in Isaiah 55:11. So shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. So, all of us like to make wise investments. The wisest investment we can make is not to invest in our personal is to invest in our personal relationship with God through our faith in Christ. That's the legacy. In turn, we have to pass that relationship along to our family and others who God has brought into our kingdom. Our spouse, children, friends, and co-workers need to experience that same relationship that we need to pass along as well. Investing in Jesus has eternal value, and our investment is invested in the safest place ever recorded. As in Matthew 6:19-21, it says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through to steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." We have studied that King Asa had a great spiritual start in life, but it did not end so well, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But had his faith in God benefited others? You know, when King Asa was dead, now he reigned for 41 years. Asa started out as a follower of God. He was destroying idols and those types of things that are out there that were interfering. He was the third king of Judea, but he was the fifth king of the house of David. So he was the fifth king after David. And as he was about to die, who was going to be his successor? And we find out in 2 Chronicles 17 that was Jehoshaphat, his son. And it says in 2 Chronicles chapter 17, verse 1 through 6, it says, "And Jehoshaphat, his son, reigned in his stead and strengthened himself against Israel. And he placed forces in all the fenced cities of Judea and set garrisons in the land of Judah and in the cities of Ephraim, which Asa his father had taken. And the Lord was with Jehoshaphat, because he walked in the first ways of his father David, and sought not unto Balaam, but sought to the Lord of God of his father, and walked in his commandments, and not after the doings of Israel. Therefore the Lord stabilized the king in his hand, and all Judea brought to Jehoshaphat presents, and he had riches and honor in abundance. And his heart was lifted up in the ways of the Lord. Moreover, he took away the high places and grooves of Judea." So, what a joy when an investment yields good results, didn't it? Jehoshaphat's life, it was yielding great results. Kind of led along with Asa, his father. In spite of how the final years of King Asa, which kind of got turned out a little bit, King Asa was a great example to Jehoshaphat in his younger years. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat because he walked in the former ways of his father David. But not only David, but his father Asa. What he did, he sought the Lord, he rejected Baal worship, removed high places and Asherah poles, and strengthened the kingdom militarily. So what a joy when an eternal investment pays off, especially the investment that honors God. And that's what Jehoshaphat did. He followed the teachings of his father and the teachings of David. When we are in a right relationship with God that allows God to work through us and reveal himself to us, where we learn and we grow in know the knowledge of God. And that's what King Jehoshaphat did. He cleared the remnants of the pagan worships from kingdom that and there's stories where parents will bring their children up, drop them off at church, and let somebody else teach them the spiritual things that they need to know. And that's not really what God is asking parents to do. God's asking parents to be those who have the spiritual wisdom and knowledge to share with their children. Many parents today do not see the value of maintaining that right relationship with God. That's where the world is going. It's going away from God and building those relationships. And what happens when the parents don't build those relationships? Where are the children? The children lack the opportunity to learn about God and build those relationships. And what happens is history continues to repeat itself. And the thing of it is, in today's world, it's actually sad about young adults. They're drifting further and further away from Christ. And they don't have that opportunity to learn what having faith in God really is. And just like a grandfather plants an oak tree knowing he will never sit in its full shade, but his grandchildren will. Your walk with God today provides shade for future generations. It's important for the grandparents and the parents to have that relationship with God. That legacy or that foundation is absolutely imperative. Because if we don't have those generations learning what God has taught us through his word and through that relationship, what's going to happen in one generation? And you've heard me say this in Sunday school before. Everybody's going to turn to atheists or agnostics, right? If they don't understand the word of God. They need to be taught. The grandmother was known for her homemade rolls at every holiday gathering. Now, I had an aunt named Joanne, and she made what she called hobo buns, which is basically taking a yeast roll and putting a real sweet caramel syrup on it. But anyway, in this case, after the grandmother passed, the family tried to recreate them. They remembered the smell, the texture, the warmth, but they couldn't quite get it right. Now, how many of you remember your mother's cooking, and you can taste it and feel it, but you can't recreate it? Then someone found a handwritten recipe card in her Bible with notes in the margins. Let it rise longer on cold days. Don't rush the kneading, and pray while you wait. She didn't just cook, she recorded wisdom. So having that wisdom created that texture and that smell, not just putting all the ingredients together. Because I know that it's important for us to understand and have that wisdom, not alone the knowledge. A man inherited an old trunk from his father. It had been passed down for generations. Inside were items the family cherished. There were photographs, letters, and medals. But tucked inside were also things that represented painful habits. Gambling slips, empty liquor bottles, and reminders of destructive choices. He had a choice: pass it down untouched, or remove what would harm the next generation. He kept what honored the family. He destroyed what hurt it. And Jehoshaphat did the same thing spiritually. What the spiritual trunks are we passing down as well? Are there attitudes, grudges, material obsessions, or spoken sins that need to be removed? Beverly told me that her grandfather kept this little black book. And when she was growing up, if he had a disagreement with somebody, or he didn't want to speak to him or didn't like him anymore, he kind of put their name in his little black book. Well, that's not what he needed to pass down to her, but the old Italians, they had their own ways. Jehoshaphat did something different. And we read in verse 7 and 9, Jehoshaphat had an educational plan for his kingdom. Also, and I'm going to struggle with these names, so bear with me. It said, also in the 3rd year of his reign, he sent to his princesses, even to Benhau and to Obadiah and to Zechariah and to Nathanael and to Micaiah to teach in the cities of Judea. And then he sent Levites, even Shemaiah, Nethaniah, and Zebadiah, and Ashel, and Shemiramoth, and Jehonathan, and Adoniah, and Tobiah, and I don't know, but the rest of those Levites, and with them Elishama and Jerome were priests. And they taught in Judah and had the book of the law of the Lord with them, and went about throughout the cities of Judah and taught the people. So God knew the heart of King Jehoshaphat. When we have the desire of obediently serving the Lord, he leads and guides us. So King Jehoshaphat considered the needs of those whom he was responsible for. He felt like education, and in particular his people, needed to know the one true God of Judah and Yahweh. So he dispatched those to teach the people and those who he led. So basically what he sent 5 of his princesses, okay, I guess his business managers, and then he sent 9 of the Levites, and he sent 2 priests. So he scattered them in his kingdom, and so he dispatched them to teach the people all those things that could lead them to understand and commit to worship and building that relationship with God. When a nation chooses God over weapons of war, the nations surrounding them take notice. Why is that? What had been the legacy of Israel? How many wars had Israelites been in? Quite a few. And then the separation of Israel to the north and Judah to the south. The basic rub there is because Israel became more specific worship to idols, and Judah was going to follow what the relationship of God would bring. When a nation, we had been the legacy, God had revealed his power to the Israelites as he led them out of Egyptian bondage and into the promised land. Not only did he demonstrate his power to the Israelites, but to the nations of the known world. Now, have we in America forgotten the power of God through faith in Jesus? What do you think's going on today? We're getting further and further and further away from that relationship. Do we as Christians and as evangelistic church need to pray for revival in our first heart? How many things have you heard many times that this America needs a revival? And it's important for us to understand what the hearts of the people are. And I think what you will see is that this world, this America, needs a revival to turn it back to God. Legacy requires intentional transmission. If you want to leave a legacy, you have to do it intentionally. Faith must be taught, not assumed that somebody's going to pick it up. A family Bible passed down through generations, its value is not the leather binding, but in the fingerprints, notes, and underlined verses. Truth that is shared multiples. Teach Scripture to your children and grandchildren. Lead family devotionals. Share testimonies of God's faithfulness. Invest in Sunday school and discipleship. Jehoshaphat sent leaders throughout Judah with the book of the law. Now, he did not assume people would pick it up. He sent teachers, okay? That's why you send people to school. He sent teachers. Many families wish their parents had left more of their possessions. Many have said that they wish they had left written prayers, recorded testimonies, and stories of God's faithfulness. Jehoshaphat ensured the word was taught. He documented faith through action. When you intentionally pass on, it becomes permanent. So, have you ever written your testimony down? Have you ever told your grandchildren how God carried you through hardships and difficult times? I think one of the reasons that this lesson tonight, Leaving a Legacy, came to me, and I was telling Willa earlier, my granddaughter's 4 years old. I don't know if I'll be here tomorrow, but how much does she really know about her grandmother and me, what we went through, where we got started? And it started a thought process to my thought process as I was doing this lesson. I think it's important for us to sit down and write a 3 or 4 or 5 page letter to leave her a legacy of what her this side of her family was all about. Even the fact that what we learned, what we shared, where we've been, where we moved, even the difficulties we had with her father. So I think it's important for us to leave those written documents, to leave that family Bible, to leave those notes in that were important, and to understand kind of where they came from and what that relationship was with God and what our relationship was and what can we share with them that God shared with us. As we look at verses 10 through 13, and I'm going to read 10 and 11 quickly. And the fear of the Lord fell upon all the kingdoms of the land that were round about Judah, so that they made no war against the Jehoshaphat. Also some of the Philistines brought Jehoshaphat presents and tribute silver, and the Arabians brought him flocks, 7,700 rams and 7,700 goats. When we renew our resolve to be obedient to serve God through faith in Jesus, it sends a powerful message to others. And here it sent a very powerful message. Those people believed that relationship that God had with Jehoshaphat, they didn't want to be enemies. The enemy of Judah sent them gifts to maintain the right relationship with them. So they knew that Jehoshaphat was a strong proponent of God and that relationship, and they had seen it in the past, that God had protected Judah. When we are in a right relationship with God through faith in Jesus, then our desire is to share with those who do not know Jesus. And I'm sure Jehoshaphat had that opportunity to share God with his enemies. Having the right relationship with fellow people gives us the opportunity to present Jesus to them. So how you live and what your legacy is very important, because that gives the opportunity for you to share with others what God has done in your life and how to be obedient. A lighthouse does not chase ships. It simply stands firm and shines because it stands faithfully. Its influences everything around it. So, your faith affects family culture, church strength, community respect, And it also helps in Jehoshaphat's situation to show his military might. In verses 12 and 13 it says, "And Jehoshaphat waxed great exceedingly, and he built in Judah castles and cities of store, and he had much business in the city of Judah, and the men of war and mighty men of valor were in Jerusalem." While there is light, we need to be busy working to present the good news of Jesus to others. And that's what Jehoshaphat was showing, not only to his kingdom, but the people outside his kingdom. What is God willing to do for us? What legacy will we leave behind about our relationship with him? What will we leave that's going to be eternal? The fear of the Lord fell upon all the kingdoms. Surrounding nations respected Judah. Peace increased. Prosperity followed. The kingdoms grew stronger. Just that relationship. All these things happen. When leadership honors God, influence expands. Jehoshaphat's obedience created national stability, external respect, internal strength. Today, presidents are burdened by it, but not only presidents. Pastors, parents, business leaders, baseball players, they all leave a legacy. The question is not whether or not we will leave a legacy, but rather what kind of legacy will we leave. The way we live our lives matters. Our lives have an impact on others. Sometimes that impact is obvious, other times less so. But there's an impact nonetheless. Legacy is measured over time. Jehoshaphat grew greater and greater over time. Legacy is rarely dramatic. It's cumulative. So your whole life is your legacy. Financial planners talk about compound interest. How many people have seen these commercials about how great compound interest is? Small, consistent deposits grow into significant wealth over time. Faith works the same exact way. One prayer at bedtime, one Sunday after another, one act of integrity towards someone else, sharing Jesus and what he does for us, one honest conversation. Over decades, those deposits create spiritual wealth in a family and around in your friends. Those of us, especially in retirement years, now not all of you are there, some of us are, may feel like your productive years are behind you. But spiritually, this is your most powerful investment season. Your words carry weight now because you have experience. People have watched you, have seen your life, have seen your spiritual successes. Your consistency in your life, day after day, speaks loudly now. Finishing strong for the Lord is absolutely essential. You've heard me tell you this story before about this author, Steve Farrar, wrote this book, Finishing Strong, that his father-in-law went to the Dallas Seminary with 240 students, and he kept track of all of them, and when they all got to retirement, there were only 24 of them out of 240 that were still in the ministry. They lost their way. Their legacy was in question. When I hear the word legacy, I immediately think of two men in my life. One was my mother's father, Vincent Blake. And what I remember so much about him, not that he went to church every Sunday, but he formed this quartet. Now, they weren't good. My Aunt Jean, who was a piano player, and my dad, my grandfather, Vincent, my Uncle Shirley, and my Uncle Harold were a Christian quartet. Now, they were good, and they sang in a lot of places, and I can remember at homecoming church, when we had homecoming, they would bring a lot of the quartets in, and they also would ask for other quartets. And one of the things that I think my grandfather enjoyed so much was being part of that quartet, because he had three of his son-in-laws and his daughter in that quartet. So that spoke highly, I think, of attraction to his son-in-laws because they were all saved and they were all Christians. They're all born-again Christians, as my dad said. And also my father. He was saved at age 28. He ran his own business from the time World War II was over to retired in 1982. And well, they didn't have deacons in the Methodist church. They had trustees. So he was a trustee for 50 years. And he went to church every Sunday. And he's always had some participant. He was either a Sunday school superintendent or whatever. But, you know, I can remember as a little boy, he took me to a lot of revivals around the different churches in the community. And there was this one preacher Hoover. He was hellfire and brimstone. And he always scared me. But I never liked going to him. But I enjoyed because I got to meet other people. But anyway, one of the things I wanted to tell you about him is that he always told me that you could never outgive God, and that it was important for me to understand that it was important for me to share Christianity or Christian with my family. And he also left me a nice Bible with a lot of notes in it. So anyway, while Jehoshaphat had no doubt seen the tragic end of his father's life and his failure to trust God completely, he had also seen the beginning of his father's leadership, where his trust in God was evident and God's power and faithfulness was clear in his life. Jehoshaphat chose the path of following Asa's earlier example and David's before him of walking closely. He continued that legacy. In many ways, our true legacy is seen in the actions of those who follow after us. Think about that just for a minute. Think about those who follow after you. Did they see in us a committed faithfulness, a love, the ability to obey and serve Jesus to the extent that they committed their lives to following us as well? I think it's important for your children to understand that, and your grandchildren. The question is, are you living by faith and love for Jesus Christ? Is it illustrated in your obedience to him? Will your lasting legacy be a line of committed followers of Jesus who saw Jesus in your life? Have you been bringing people to the Lord? Living life that sets a good example for others, especially for your own children and family, is a worthy effort, and God will reward you for that. King Asa, though he had his failures, had sought to do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He had acted with courage, strengthening himself and his people, commanding religious reform, destroying idols, and renovating the temple. The result was blessings from God, giving victory over enemies in a time of peace and prosperity. He kept his enemies at bay. No doubt as a child, Jehoshaphat seen the good example of his father and followed Asa's lead to honor and seek the Lord throughout his reign as king of Judah. The result of following his father's legacy resulted in more blessings from God. Jehoshaphat and the southern kingdom had determined to follow the Lord. The northern kingdom went their way, away from that relationship with God. And what happened? They eventually were captured and taken to Babylonia. Jehoshaphat did not seek Baal, the false gods of nature, advocated by Israel's king Ahab and his wife Jezebel. The idolatrous practices of the northern tribe had resulted in Asa's hostility to his kinsmen and continued under Jehoshaphat at least early on in his reign. So the separation of the northern and the southern kingdom wasn't a pleasant one. Not only did Jehoshaphat continue to remove the idolatry from the land, he wisely realized it's not enough to simply condemn what was wrong, but to seek to remove all the bad influences in it. You must lead the people to fill their lives with a genuine and fulfilling worship of the one true God. And that's what Jehoshaphat was attempting to do. Condemning evil practices is less than half of the battle. We must do that. We must go full speed ahead to quickly replace what we condemn and find the good. What is good and best is to love the Lord, our God, with all our heart, soul, and mind. And Asa had taken steps to reform Jehoshaphat, and they continued that reform. Genuine followers of the Lord who obey and practice God's word will gain attention from those in our family and others around us. How needful is that kind of influence in our day? I think it's very important. When you have a family gathering and somebody was asked to bless the food, who do they always point to? And in my case, it was my grandfather, because they respected him as the most obedient and loving Jesus person in that whole crowd. Not that everybody wasn't a Christian, but to me, they always asked him, because we knew as a family that he was the leader of our family in taking us and teaching the generations ahead. What will our legacy be to our children, to our neighbors, our community, and even to our nation? Are we concerned about leaving wealth and possessions? Or better, are we concerning ourselves about setting good examples of faith, a life of love, and obedience to our God? I always knew in Proverbs it tells you that it's important for us to leave a legacy. But you know what? I always thought, well, what am I going to leave materially to my son and to my grandchildren? And that's not what legacy is. Legacy has nothing to do with that. That's not what we need to focus on. We need to focus on leaving the legacy of our relationship with Jesus Christ and how that relationship protects us, keeps peace in our life, and helps us to have that ability to share with others. We need to make every effort to invest in others, establishing and teaching others the way and the word of the Lord. Wealth and possessions are temporary, but spiritual possessions and a godly legacy will deliver current and eternal blessings. Think about that. There will be blessings as a result. There will be rewards in your life that God puts there for you for being obedient. That's all he asks us. That's what we show our love best, when we are obedient to him. A man once said, "Someone is following my footsteps." A child watches how you handle conflict, handle your money, handle disappointment, how you handle success. They may forget your words, but they will remember your pattern. So, I challenge you here. You may not control how long you live, but you absolutely control how you live. When your race is finished, will it be said, "He strengthened his house in the ways of the Lord. She walked in faithfulness and taught others to do the same." That is what legacy is all about. And I think it's important for us to focus on that. And I think it's important for us to leave a written note to our children and our grandchildren. That's what I learned about doing this study tonight. And I hope you all have learned something as well. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to have a request for prayer. And Joel, I think our streaming has to end at that point before we do that.